what's up? Z back here again, and it's time for another discussion video. You guys seem to like my Teddy versus Sam Bradford video, so this time we're going to make it a little bit bigger, and we're going to say who is the best quarterback of the whole 2014 draft class. So before you guys type up a storm on my comment section and dislike this video that Derek Carr is obviously the best, hear me through. We're going to break this down stat by stat of all the quarterbacks that had significant enough playing time, which really boils down to 3. But without any further ado, let's talk about some of the anomalies, some of the quarterbacks that didn't quite get enough playing time to really show up, but have shown a little bit of potential. Starting out with the worst out of the whole bunch is Zach Mettenberger. Zach Mettenberger was drafted by the Titans, and you see the potential. He's 6'5", 224 pounds. Now he's with the Steelers. That's a really Big Ben type of a guy. And that's kind of like his ceiling, which is a really high ceiling, but that's what you kind of hope for with Zach. But he's extremely raw, and that's shown. But with this playing time, in 2014 and 2015, he appeared in 7 games. During that time, he threw for 12 touchdowns and 14 interceptions, so not a very good touchdown to interception ratio at all. But the 4.5% of his throws being a touchdown in 2014 has shown that he does have some potential. So that's Zach Mettenberger. Probably top of his career, will probably be a solid backup quarterback. That's what I'll kind of lay him as. Maybe the next Sean Hill, but that's Zach Mettenberger for now. Now let's look at next on the list is A.J. McCarron, the backup quarterback for the Bengals, and he hasn't appeared in that many games. 7 as well, only in 2015. He threw 119 times. He completed 79 of them for 66.4 completion rating, which is really good. 17, he had 854 yards for a 7.2 average. That was 6 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. So when he's been in the game, he's been good. And 97 rating. So everything checking out for A.J. McCarron. I think he's one of those guys that's kind of a borderline starter in this league. So I wouldn't be surprised if he finds himself at least in a starting quarterback area where he can maybe attempt to be the next starting quarterback for a team. So that's him. So now let's move on to the next quarterback, and that is perhaps we're starting into starting quarterback territory, and that is starting off with Tom Savage, the 6'4", 230-pound quarterback for the Texans. He only appeared in 5 games in his career, and he hasn't done a whole lot really. But when you're the number 1 on the depth chart right now for the Texans, and he played a lot throughout the stretch last year, and looked confident enough. Now the Texans are a run-first offense that just kind of needs to hopefully get a few field goals or whatever. Touchdowns aren't that big of a deal, but going his whole career without throwing a single touchdown pass is pretty alarming. But let's look at what he's done. He's 73 attempts and he's completed 46 of those. That's a 63% completion ratings, which is lower than A.J. McCarron. But he didn't turn the ball over at all. He didn't throw any touchdowns either, but I think that's enough to put him next on the list. But these top ones aren't in that big of an order. You can flip them up if you guys really want to. You guys can tell me this whole list. You guys can tell me what your list would be down below. Next on the list, one of the most interesting ones. Some say full potential, some say just a product of the system. That is, of course, Jimmy Garoppolo of the Patriots. He's 6'2", 225 pounds. And he has some pretty decent numbers for a guy that's been backing up Brady. He has, of course, played the initial games last year while Brady had a suspension, but he was very good in those games. He passed 63 times, completed 43 of them. That's a 68 completion percentage, and that isn't atypical of Garoppolo. As in 2014, he also played in 6 games. He had 27 attempts. He completed 19 of those. That was a 70% completion rating. So Garoppolo is shown to be extremely accurate. You could attribute that to the Belichick system, a lot of quick slants, a lot of short passes to help the kid out, but that's still a lot of plays he does himself. So out of those completions in 2016, he got 502 yards. He had an 8 average, and he had 4 touchdowns and no interceptions, a 6.3 touchdown percent, and a quarterback rating of 113.3. So he's been very, very good in his limited time. Not a big enough sample size to move him higher on the board, but for people that say you should trade for Jimmy Garoppolo, I would say go for it. You've seen a ton of talent for him. The Patriots will probably be fine with him being the quarterback of the future, but it depends how long Brady has. And I know Belichick's definitely smart enough to know if it's worth trading him, just trade him now and get as much for him as you can. Because you could probably get a first-round pick for Garoppolo. So you could probably make a really strong case that he's better than any quarterback in the draft this year. So now moving on the list, some starter territory. Starting with the most controversial quarterback in this whole discussion video, Johnny Football. Oh, I do not like talking about Johnny Football. So much hype around him in the draft was, and he boozed it away. So, and he's played in 14 games. He has career 7 touchdowns, 7 interceptions for 1,600 yards, and a 74 rating. And the thing with Johnny Manziel, he has all kinds of talent. He's the closest one on this list to top ceiling talent being about Russell Wilson level. And I don't think he'd ever be as smart as Russell Wilson, but he has just as much athletic ability and probably arm talent as well. So the comparison there, I think, is really striking. But in 9 games, he had 223 attempts for 129 completions. That's only a 57.8 completion percentage. He had 1,500 yards, a 6.7 average, which is pretty low as well. He had 7 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. So the stats don't jump off the table. The reason Johnny Manziel is higher than Jimmy G is just based off talent alone, and he started more games than Jimmy Garoppolo. And you can make a case that if Johnny Manziel didn't have as many off-the-field distractions, that he could be a really, really good quarterback in this league. But he blew his career away probably by doing dumb, childlike decisions that is probably going to cost him his NFL career. But if he didn't have that, he'd be probably one of the top-notch starters quarterbacks in the league, probably in the top 15. But with just talent alone, but it doesn't work when you're blowing it away. So that's why Johnny Manziel as high as he is, but low enough. Alright, so now the big three, the three you've all been waiting for. Starting off with the dark horse, really. He came off the board a lot earlier than I thought he could. And that is Blake Bortles of the Jaguars. Last year, he played in all 16 games for 625 attempts. He completed 368 of those, a 58.9 completion percentage for 3,900 yards, a 6.2 average, 244 yards a game, 23 touchdowns and 16 interceptions. That's a 3.7 percentage for touchdowns and 2.6 percentage for interceptions. A lot to like about Blake Bortles. He kind of fell under the radar. Look at his 2015 numbers, and it was even better. A 58.6 completion percentage. He threw for 4,400 yards, a 7.3 average, 35 touchdowns to 18 interceptions. Those are really, really good numbers. Those are numbers that you'd say, okay, this guy's the guy. But you look at completion percentage, that is low, and that could really be a detriment to him being a lot better than a lot of people think he could be. Looking at those numbers, of course, you need to look at the Jacksonville Jaguars team in general, and their defense has struggled for years. Now, I think it's getting a lot better. I think they had a really good draft last year, and if they get more pieces around in the upcoming draft, I think they could be a solid team and maybe compete for that division, maybe for a wild card spot, but they're a ways from being a good playoff contender. But Bortles could really be their guy, but those numbers are, I'd say, a little bit higher than what they would be if you had a good competitive team. The reason that is a lot. You have to remember a lot of garbage time. Teams can be a little more lax with them, and it's showing because they haven't won a lot of games while he's been there. So that is Blake Bortles. He has solid numbers on paper, but on the field you can see he's not as good as these top two. And I'll try to be as unbiased as possible in order to compare these top two side by side. This is the main section of this video, is Teddy Bridgewater versus Derek Carr. Let's get into it. These two quarterbacks have gone head to head, who's better, for a while, and I want to make my case for Teddy not being better, but at least being in the same conversation as Derek Carr. So let's look into it, starting with my baby Teddy. So let's look at, we're going to break these two down a little bit when we did the other quarterbacks. Rookie year for Teddy Bridgewater. He played in 13 games, had 402 attempts. He completed 259 of those. He had a 64.4 completion percentage. So he was attempting 30.9 attempts a game. He completed 29. He had 2,900 throwing yards on the year, a 7.3 average, 224 yards a game, 14 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and that was Teddy Bridgewater's rookie year. Now, the biggest knock on Teddy Bridgewater is lack of touchdowns. 14 touchdowns is not going to get it done, and 13 games of 3.5% isn't too bad. But we'll break into that a little more later. So, his sophomore year, you could say it was a little bit of a sophomore slump. He appeared in all 16 games, a 65% completion rating, but after that, it's downhill, staying at only 14 touchdowns. He threw less interceptions, though, which is nice to see in more games. So, 2% completion percentage. So, Teddy Bridgewater, if you know, it's a really, really good defense. You don't want to make mistakes. So, Wade Zimmer's probably got him coached up. If nothing's there, don't force it. Just throw it out of bounds and we'll punt. But don't force it. And we have Adrian Peterson, so he's going to steal a lot of touchdowns away from Teddy Bridgewater. So in a scenario where he would have been healthy either last year or this upcoming season, which I don't see him playing a whole lot this year because Sam Bradford's on the team, will probably use him, maybe trade him or something. But that's going to be interesting to see where that goes. But Teddy Bridgewater, I think he has a ton of talent and could have a lot better numbers on a team that needed more yards. So let's look at Derek Carr, who of course had a great year last year before he broke his leg. But in 2014, his rookie year, he played in all 16 games. He threw the balls 599 times, which is insane, the most he threw in a season in his career. He had 348 completions for a 58%, 37 passes a game, 3,200 yards, a 5.5 average, 204 yards a game, 21 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. So side by side, let's look at rookie stats. You're looking at 64% throwing percentage for Teddy compared to a 58 for Carr. That's a big difference for Teddy winning that category easy. A 7.3 per pass average. I'm going to do mostly averages on this just because it's hard to compare it when he played in 3 more games. So a 5.5 average for Carr gives Teddy a lead. Who would have thought Teddy Bridgewater, Mr. Noodle Arm himself, is throwing the ball on average further than Derek Carr. So now let's move over to touchdown percentage, a 3.5 touchdown percentage for Teddy, and this is where Carr gets a tie at 3.5 percentage for himself as well. So a tie there, a 3% interception ratio for Teddy, and Carr wins that category at 2%. So despite Teddy being the guy supposed to be a little less turnover heavy, Carr was a little better on that on the year. But every other stat, Teddy won. So just looking at potential, a little less coaching, and Teddy on paper has more talent. I don't think that can really be argued. Stats can lie, but when you break it down like that, I think Teddy's had more going against him, as Derek Carr comes from a more pass-friendly Raiders. So now you see 2015, they draft Amari Cooper, and his numbers start to explode. He played in 16 games, had 573 attempts, he completed 350 of those, 61 completion percentage for 3,900 yards, a 7 average, 32 touchdowns to 13 interceptions. His numbers were off the chart, and below Teddy's completely out of the water in every single category. 7.2 average for Teddy is the only one where he beats him, and that's by a 0.2, which is still very impressive and a very pass-heavy, throw-it-deep type offense that the Raiders do with Derek Carr. He still gets it done. But you have to remember the Raiders aren't any slouch in the running game either. Latavius Murray, as the Vikings got, was a very good running back for them. Now they had 3 running backs last year where they split the carries. So it wasn't just It wasn't like the Patriots where it just throw the ball 60 times and let this game get this was game one. It was a pretty even offense, so I can't hold that totally against Carr. And the 2016 season was stellar as well, but it's hard. I can't compare that to Teddy's because we all know what happened to Teddy. Now, interesting thing you compare about these quarterbacks too is how are they going to prepare for the future, as they both had a season-ending injury. Now, the season for Carr was about 2 games after he hurt it, and for Teddy it was 16 games. But it's going to be interesting to see how these go. Teddy's injury was, of course, a lot worse with the dislocated knee. People don't even know if he's going to play again. I'm definitely not on that boat. I think he'll be good enough to play this upcoming season towards the middle of the year. But will he play? I think we're going to wait until he's 100% and not take any chances with him and make sure we get his confidence all the way up before we put him behind center. And Derek Carr, a broken leg, doctors are way better than what they could have been a long time ago, and something like that's not even that big of a deal, so expect him to be ready at the start of the season. So Derek Carr's future is looking brighter than Teddy's, but I think Teddy has all kinds of potential to not make this completely one-sided. So let's take another look at these in a different perspective, and let's look at some veteran quarterbacks that kind of resemble these two. So for Derek Carr, we're going to compare him to Drew Brees, because they're kind of the same style of quarterback. Drew Brees is doesn't really have a running game, but let's look at his first real breakout year, 2014. He played in 15 games. He had 400 attempts. He completed 262 of those, a 65% completion percentage. He had 27 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. So comparing that to Derek Carr's 2015 season, very similar. So if you look at the ceiling for Derek Carr, it's kind of Drew Brees. For Teddy Bridgewater, the one I compared it to was no other than Russell Wilson. I'll take Teddy's 2015 season, where 65% completion percentage and only 14 touchdowns and 9 interceptions, to Russell Wilson. Let's talk about his sophomore season as well. He also played in 16 games, a 63% completion percentage, which was less than Teddy, 8.2 average, which is really high. 209.8 yards a game compared to Teddy, who had 201 yards a game, so very similar there as well. And he threw for 26 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. So that is where Russell Wilson really excelled. Even in a team where he also had Marshawn Lynch and the Vikings, of course, had Adrian Peterson, he still got his touchdown. So looking at that, very similar quarterbacks. Derek Carr is a lot closer to Drew Brees than Teddy Bridgewater is to Russell Wilson. So at the end of the day, I do have to give Derek Carr the edge of being the best quarterback of the draft class, but I think Teddy Bridgewater has a ton of potential, and he has shown that he's better at some categories than straight up, and he plays to win the game. He's more of a team player. The Raiders were in the playoffs this last year, but before that, it was just kind of, well, there's a lot more garbage time, and we're going to get those yards and touchdowns at the end of the games because the defenses don't really care anymore. But Teddy did what it takes to win the game. I don't know exactly how much of it was game plan. I might be giving him too much credit. If you feel free to roast me in the comment section down below if that's what you guys feel. So there we go. There's our video. Carr versus Teddy, and also threw in some of the other 2014 rookie quarterbacks in here. Tell me down below who is your favorite 2014 quarterback, and make sure to subscribe for more discussion just like that. And we'll see you guys in the next JOZ video. See ya.